Hello, this is Colin Salao, a reporter at FOS, and I am speaking today with Monica McNutt. She is a basketball analyst, host, reporter, all that you want to be on TV for ESPN, MSG Networks, everything in the sports and basketball space. Hi, Monica. Thanks for joining me.
What's up, Colin? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about you as a woman in the space and how you've navigated the space of men's sports. Obviously, you cover both men's and women's basketball, but you're a prominent, reporter and host in the men's basketball space. But I'll start with this. You played basketball growing up. You were a hooper at Georgetown. I watched a couple of videos of you before this. Going all around the world, the 2022 All-Star game. I saw that one. Are there any parallelisms with you playing basketball, probably playing against a lot of men growing up, and navigating this space that's very male dominated in the sports media realm?
Yeah, I think it's funny because you go from like having to play against the boys because the options weren't necessarily there for the girls to women's sports. Still, plenty of male coaches, dads involved, brothers involved, and then you go to actually covering male sports. It's funny when you ask that question. I thought first about my sort of middle school formative years working out with my dad, and then at our local community gym, guys would come in Saturday morning to hoop, and I would be asked if I could play, but my dad would make them play with a women's ball because he would be like, "Nah, she's got a future. Y'all are washed. Like, we're not messing up her shot." But more times than not, Colin, as I think about it, the men obliged. Like, it wasn't a big deal. And so I have found both in my playing experience and in my professional experience, it's not really the athletes, the coaches, um, mostly not the agents. Like, it's not the people that are actually in sport, that play sport, that respect competition, that respect athletes, both men and women, and of various ages. Those aren't the people making the noise about whether or not women belong. It's all of these guys sitting at home that wish they could. Also, I apologize in advance. New puppy, he's learning that he can bark. So there's a thing.
It's okay. It's entertaining. It's part of the conversation. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fascinating to see that. Like, there is a lot of talk. I mean, of people, on social media and all of that stuff. And it's interesting that you didn't necessarily feel that as you were going through it. I want to move there because we've seen you've talked about both with FOS and other places about how Doris Burke is someone you admire, and she's obviously now in team A of the broadcasting team of ESPN, broken a ton of barriers. So in that case, like since you joined, or even since when you were playing basketball, like how have you seen this space evolve in this time to be more inclusive of women, and then where is also like maybe more room for improvement as well?
Man, well, first of all, to have DB on the A team is like, boom, look at us. We making real progress. But it's not like, and I almost, that comes with a little bit of an underbelly to make that statement because it's not about progress in the sense of like, oh, we're going to champion equality and morality. No, she's a damn good analyst, right? Like, and she's been doing this since I just listened to the 5-year anniversary 30 for 30 podcast of March 11th, the day we all shut down for COVID. And I heard her say, like, she's been an analyst since 1990. Like, she's done this. You know what I mean? I am really encouraged, and I can speak to my experience at ESPN. I've had an opportunity to wear a number of hats, and all of them haven't necessarily been a good fit. But I'm thankful for folks like David Roberts, a Thomas Kittner, like folks that are willing to give you the opportunity and then give you the feedback, because you also need the feedback to be able to grow, right? I am encouraged by the number of women that I now see that have the opportunity to follow in Doris Burke's footsteps, in particular when you talk about analysts. Obviously, hosting also brings women to the table, whether it's television studio show analysts or game analysts or reporter. Like, there's a number of ways that we're seeing women add to the conversation and contribute to the sport. And I just think the mutual respect there is really, really cool. I know last year I had a chance to be a part of a broadcast with Debbie Antonelli and Andrea Carter, and we were the team. The three of us were the team. And that was not an International Women's Day broadcast, although ESPN does make a big deal out of International Women's Day, as they should. So I'm encouraged. I know that for myself, And I think part of this for me goes back to my background as an athlete. I want feedback. I want criticism. I want to be told, hey, you did it this way. It would be better served if you do it this way. From people that I trust and people that I know are invested. Now, part of the noise is part of being in sport. Like, fan is short for fanatic. And so I think as women, we got to figure out how to navigate the people that are giving you feedback that you can trust, and then just the noise. Because the noise is not exclusive to just us. It's a different type of noise that can be kind of nasty and gross and misogynistic, obviously. But the noise is not just exclusive to us in this day and age, of anyone that has a platform. Somebody can have something to say about you on social media.
It's very fascinating. My takeaway as you're speaking here is kind of like, for a while maybe there's not as many opportunities at first, whether it's because there's noise, but right now what you're basically saying is like, we want to show that on merit, whether it's women or people of color or anything like that, like on merit, we will be able to get these roles, and still we could take criticism. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say, but it's so interesting, Colin, that you say on merit, right? Like, as I said to you, I've had a ton of opportunities at ESPN. I've had a ton of opportunities with MSG networks as well, and I'm very grateful. If someone said to me, around the word merit that you use, which I think is totally appropriate, if someone said to me, you never played in the NBA, if someone said you didn't play in the WNBA, I could be like, okay, cool. Like, true, but I'm studying this, I'm following this closely, I'm working at the craft. So I think this idea of like, I'm fascinated with this idea of merit, because I think opportunities can be given and we are better in our experience at large when there is a diverse range of voices. I'm not necessarily saying that I need to be the A team, but I do believe that I bring something to this conversation, right? And if you can get past whatever you believe is the merit and just listen, right? There's something there. Now, when it comes to this idea of diversity, I guess if we are going to call a spade, you do need employers that believe that that is valuable, because the merit could be picked apart. But we could get into the weeds, Colin, and we're not going to do this right now, about opportunity and systemic opportunity and either the lack thereof or who those opportunities go to. Like, it's a whole layered conversation that we could get into. But what I can say is myself and the women that I'm fortunate to call friends in this business, they are working their butts off.
Okay. Maybe at another time, if I see you at the next Front Office Sports Tune-In event, we'll sit down and talk for 2 hours, because it is something fascinating to me.
For
Like,
real.
even just the way you're talking, like, I'm covering, basketball, and I've never been on a high school team even. So, just to hear that honestly from you is it's making me think about that idea of what merit may be. But okay, moving to you and your career. So you spoke, that viral clip with Stephen A. Smith, but a lot of what you said there was that the WNBA has been growing for the last few years. Obviously, last year was a massive jump, 100% increases in viewership and all. But I asked that to you because I'm curious where you fit in. You've talked about how, like, you have so many roles at ESPN, but technically, are you still at a point where you're like, I'm okay to balance being both an NBA and a WNBA analyst and reporter, or do you want to find a space there?
Colin, man, you are asking the hard-hitting questions. I love staying in the WNBA, and I think this year, because my NBA roles have grown both at ESPN and MSG networks, I had to take a step back from women's college basketball, which I love and miss. But again, like, you're trying to be able to survive. And so I definitely want to stay in the WNBA fully present, whether that is game analyst, studio analyst, working on features. I'm all in. I want to stay there. But I got married last summer. It's a very real conversation for me about what does my life look like. Obviously, my marriage is important. My family is important. The WNBA plays through the summer. The NBA plays through the fall. So it has been a puzzle for sure to figure out when I can deliberately carve out time to spend it with my loved ones. But to the first part of your question, I am so thrilled, so pumped, so excited about the continued growth of the WNBA. And I'll tell you this. So obviously we all know the moment last year or whatever. 2 weeks ago, was that 2 weeks ago? No, this past week, I was joining both Get Up and First Take remotely because I was on assignment with the Knicks. and we come into a segment with a quick take talking about the women's NCAA tournament and Juju Watkins. And I have the chance to rattle off other names that I want people to be able to follow. Yes, Juju's terrific and she's great, but here are two teams that might challenge her: Kiki Rice and Lauren Betts at UCLA, Texas with Rory Harmon, and I'm blanking on Madison's last name. I'm sorry, Madison, if you hear this, but they're players. And so it was a really cool moment. And Stephen A is like super energetic about it, and obviously he's well aware of Juju Watkins at this point. But for me, I sat back and kind of was like, wow, that was like super full circle from where we were last year. So I'm thrilled about the growth of the women's game. I think both the combination of marketing dollars, media attention, and of course the talent. But I believe that the talent has always been there. But now we're trying to have, or seemingly having, real conversations about some of the inequities in sports. And if it can trickle down from the pro level down to where I believe it is most important when you talk about middle school sports and girls between the ages of 10 and 13, 10 and 14, trying to stay in sport, like that's what I'm looking forward to. The trickle down, because it's starting up top, to really help develop equity within women's sports.
That's, thanks for that full. You said full circle. That's a full answer. Thanks for that. We're good because we're gonna talk more about the WNBA. I have some I'm so interested to hear about some of the WNBA questions of growth. But a couple more things on you. Mm-hmm. In 2023, Michael McCarthy, our FOS senior writer, wrote a story about you, kind of like a profile. And in the story, it said, you said you were still chasing the moon. That was 2023. And you just, over the last couple of years, you got married. Mm-hmm. You have a dog, apparently, over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And you just said in your last answer that you're trying to navigate how it's like to spend time with the other parts of your life. I think in the Tuned In interview, you also said that this is not your identity.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious, 2 years after that chasing the moon quote, where are you in terms of where you see yourself in this space? Is the moon higher now, or is it sort of the same?
I still would say that I'm chasing the moon, but I would say the moon is a little bit nebulous. Again, I've had tremendous opportunity to try different things at ESPN. I don't think I'm done trying different things at ESPN given the opportunity. But I also will say that in the last couple of years, I have gotten even more rooted in the statement that I'm building a life and not just a career. So whatever the moon looks like and Fall Amongst the Stars, whatever those stars are going to look like, two things for me. I know that it can be seasonal, and no one assignment in my life is necessarily forever. And the second part is I need it to fit my life. So I'm really excited. I don't have all the answers in terms of the future. I still love live games and live events. That's truly where my heart is. But if my life and family dictated that I needed something with a different sort of schedule or maybe less travel, I'm open to all of the things. And so I'm in a really beautiful place. I'm excited. I think I would say, though, of saying that quote last year or the last couple time we had a chance to sit down with FOS, it is still applicable. But I think what people should understand, and I say this to young people all the time, like when I'm talking about mentors, is when you think you got there, there's more. And so I encourage the whole being conversation. Being very clear on your motivation. Some people are motivated by the contract and the money. Some people are motivated by the impact and whose lives you're touching. Some people are motivated by the assignment. And that is very personal. But I think if people can get clear on that, then they can have the healthiest journey possible. Because it could be a whole lot of looking left or right and seeing what's going on. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do good business, because that's one of the things that I am mindful of too. What is market value? But I think for me, I'm more worried about the big picture of my life than I am solely the career. Now, my career gets a lot of my energy, but I'm mindful that I want those career roles to fit into my life.
I'm here listening like a young reporter too. Just okay. Well, you kind of gave advice there. That was actually where I was going to go next, though, because again, this thing that our theme this month is really learning about women in men's space, and I wanted to throw that to you then. If there was a college woman right now who wanted to cover the NBA, who wanted to cover the NFL, and there are women in your space, like Mina Kimes, obviously, who's doing the NFL. But what would you say to them in terms of where this space is now and how they can put themselves in a position to be where you guys are?
I think it's probably more welcoming than it's ever been. That doesn't mean that progress still doesn't need to be made, though. But I think for me, if you respect the craft, and that's tricky in an era of Instagram and social media, because some folks like to be seen, but I don't know if they want to be read as far as their actual work, right? If you respect the craft, if you're studying, if you're mindful of networking, if you understand that you take yourself with you wherever you go, um, there's a whole debate right now about whether or not success happens from hard work or opportunity is given. So I'm like a little bit stuck before I give my whole answer. Um, if you respect the craft, if you are diligent about growing in your skill set, if you are mindful that you take yourself wherever you go, and I would add, if you believe that the opportunity is going to come, you'll find your way. You'll find your way. Like I don't have the Bible, so to speak, on how to do it. So many of us have different paths to get here. I think in the conversation around women, appearance is still very much a thing about how you navigate it. But I think you have to be able to look in the mirror and say, I'm proud of the work that I did. I'm proud of the way that I showed up. And that is varies case by case to a degree, right? Um, but I would say, especially to a former athlete, when I reflect back, one of the most frustrating parts about my transition from being a student athlete to trying to get into the sports media world was that it was not formulaic in the way that sport had been for me. You can't shoot the shot, work on the shot in practice, you'll get the opportunity to hit the shot in game, right? That wasn't my experience getting my first job. I was working at it, but it was such a subjective business. The yes took a while for it to come. And so, as an athlete, former athletes in particular, I would encourage you to know that you have all of the soft skills that you need to be able to be successful in this business. You probably have a hard skill in terms of understanding sport, understanding locker rooms, having the mindset of an athlete. But you got to give yourself a little bit of grace because it is subjective. The difference now, though, I think from when I was coming up is probably that you can create your own platforms. And so many people have been able to find their niche in that way, which is very powerful. So, two things that I say to boil this conversation down, assuming that you understand the basics of working at the craft, showing up consistently, is to have a healthy relationship with the word no. That is to be able to use it to protect your dreams and to receive it without it decimating your dreams, because the yeses in the beginning and even the yeses midway through sometimes are few and far between. So you got to have a healthy relationship with the word no. And then you just got to be mindful that you take yourself with you wherever you go. In an era of cell phones and pictures and all of that, you might not think that you're at a job interview, but if you're in a space having to do with the sport or the career path that you want to take, you need to be mindful because you don't know who's in there. You don't know who got what on that camera. Like, you got to show up both in your best self professionally, of course, and then you need to be mindful of when you can completely let your hair down, depending on who's around.
I love that. I'm gonna like literally re-listen to that myself and be like, all right, I gotta be more powerful with the no. One thing, this is a little bit interesting. You know, there was a before I move on to asking about the NBA and WNBA real quick, there was, you know, the report 2 weeks ago, partly, you know, first broken by the Athletic, that Stephen A. Smith got this $100 million contract,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you know, it's news that everybody's aware of. He's talked about it a lot already. And you know, when I looked at the space, a lot of the people who are getting these massive deals in the sports space are, you know, men, people who
Mm-hmm.
are legacy. Not to say that there aren't women who have gotten it, like Mina has been reported to, Shanae got a new deal. I'm curious though, like, do you think that's just more of a timing thing? Is that just more of, or do you, you know, you seem very complimentary about ESPN, but is there something still there that's like that's a gap between men and women, or is that just speculation from people like us who are afar?
I think ESPN is comfortable paying when you got a big thing attached to you. I mean, Mina and Shanae, if they're not on 5 days a week, it's pretty close to 5 days a week, whether it's NBA Today or NFL Live. Like, they are very visible on those sports. Stephen A., I mean, this is his second stint at the company. He's been at this for, God, got to be more than 25 years. He's on 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. I'm not into counting nobody else's pockets, but when I look at it in terms of these people are attached to big things, it makes sense to me. Now, does that mean that I have room to have some discussions on my own personal behalf? Sure. Like, who don't want to make more money? But as I have observed ESPN, they pay big when you're on big projects and like you have a thing to your name. And First Take is one of the most synonymous things with the company outside of live sports.
Yeah. We'll make sure that this gets like 3 million views so that you get your boost. I know we're coming up on three, but I'll ask a couple of quick ones on NBA and WNBA if you don't
Okay.
mind. First, NBA one. The big narrative this year has been the play style, the criticism of the play style. I know you've talked about this before, but your quick thoughts on, is that a thing? Is that really what's the ratings are now pretty much even from last year, but is that really what, or is there just something else going on?
The play style specifically, everybody was whining about 3-point shooting.
3-point shooting, flopping, maybe even.
I was like, are we still doing that? Everybody get over it. Threes are
There,
great.
there we go. That's the one I was.
Threes are great. Look, the Boston Celtics lead the league in 3-point attempts. I believe that I'm pretty sure they're top 10 in percentage, if not top 5. They just came off a championship. I do believe, and I've been a part of various press conferences with a bunch of different head coaches. I do think this thing is going to be cyclical, right? Everybody's spread out, shooting threes right now. Cooper Flag, hopefully his ankle's not anything serious, but Cooper Flag has the ability to space the floor. But like, who's the guy that's going to be like, all right, I'm bringing it back in the paint old school? It's a copycat league, right? Like, we're shooting threes because of Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors and their dynastic run. I do genuinely believe that it'll swing back. The pendulum will swing back.
No, I mean, to your point, the Nuggets don't shoot a lot of threes, and they won the championship like 2 years ago.
Right. So I genuinely believe it'll swing back.
Yeah. On WNBA talk, the big thing that went viral last year with you and Stephen A. Smith was a discussion of Caitlin Clark and the criticism she received and things like that. It's been maybe half a year since then. There's been a lot of change and movement. The season's over.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back at that conversation you had and the landscape now, what are you looking at as what it looks right now in terms of how people, whether it's outside noise or within, are talking about that conversation on Caitlin Clark and even the whole league at large?
Colin, the way that I still get random ads about Caitlin, and I haven't had to say anything about Caitlin in like 6 months, and I'm like, please go find a hobby, read a book. So 2 things on that. One, that conversation for me, I think this goes without saying for people that know my work and follow the WNBA, was in no way disrespecting or belittling what Caitlin Clark has done. I agree with Don Staley. She's been tremendous for the league. I've covered a bunch of her games. I've had a chance to talk with her. She's great. I do also admire and appreciate when she was nominated, was she Times Athlete of the Year?
Yeah.
Some of the things that she took the time to address there that we had not heard from her over the course of the regular season. But I totally get that baby's 22, 23? Like, right. I don't 22, 23-year-old me need not be talking about big stuff too, right? Although I grew up a little bit differently, but I can hold space for her experience. So by no means do I have any shade for Caitlin Clark. But as I think back to that day, it is an example of how the media has power. Literally, that conversation that day was about how Kennedy Carter, hothead, growing, hopefully she's growing and maturing, but known as a hothead in the WNBA, her act was about to be plastered as the entire league feeling this way. What? Anyway, we've moved on from it. Hopefully we've grown from it. And so I think as we go into this next upcoming WNBA season, and this is the challenge that I meant in that day, the challenge that I still stand on, let's talk it for real. Let's talk it. I'm not naive to think that NFL training camp still is not a topic of interest in summer. I know it is. But you also have WNBA actual basketball playoffs and postseason ramping up, right? So how do we honor the sport and its athletes with fair coverage? I am not saying to you that Caitlin Clark is not a name that draws. I'm not saying to you that Asia Wilson is a name that doesn't draw. I'm not saying that the New York Liberty as a market is a team that we shouldn't be talking about all the time. But I am saying there should be a mindfulness of what you say out your mouth. If you're going to talk ball, fine, talk ball. Because if we were just talking ball, who cares about a flagrant foul on a Monday?
Right.
That's not a story.
Right. Especially the fact that I get what you're saying, where it's like plastering the entire league for the actions of Kennedy Carter.
Yeah,
right?
like if we I know I'm a regular on First Take, and sometimes I'm like, oh my God, when the producers needle us with these questions. in terms of trying to find a debate. I'm not saying that I'm not even saying that we can't argue about who you want, Stewie or Asia Wilson. Like, I'm not saying we can't even have that. But let's treat this sport as sport and athletes, and not like get into this weird place about what is and isn't acceptable.
Well, speaking of the WNBA's growth, I've wanted to ask someone in the middle of this their thoughts on this question for so long. So I'm
Okay.
so excited to ask you this. Everyone's excited about the WNBA's this season, 2025. You know, all the changes, whoever comes from the draft, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also kind of this looming thing where their CBA for 2026 has not been signed, and
Mm-hmm.
like 80% of the league or something is a free agent, and we have no
Mm-hmm.
clue what's gonna happen. We don't know if they're gonna play. I just want to hear what you have to say about that in general and that chaos that might ensue in 2026 that people aren't really talking about.
Ooh, Colin, the tea is getting hot. It's funny because I just heard or saw on Instagram a very presidential, well stated, and eloquent clip from the president of the Players Association, Nneka Ogwumike. Obviously, I think about a week ago now, there's some buzz around Angel Reese's comments on her podcast.
Mm.
We saw what Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart were able to create with Unrivaled. I can say from my personal experience, I can remember being at Georgetown. And to this day, I'm very grateful that I was able to bounce a basketball and get a free education. But I can remember being like, oh, I'm going to school for free. Like, these slights that the men's team is getting and I'm not getting, they're fine. It doesn't matter. I'm going to school for free. That's my focus. And so I remember having this attitude of gratitude that while I am someone who believes in gratitude overall, in that sense, it kept me from expecting more. This generation, mm-mm. Nope. They're just not happy to be here. And I think as you've seen the new media right evaluations come down with these big time numbers and more sponsorships coming on and more marketing, these women, to me, are about their business in a way that I don't know generations prior had the luxury of being because they needed the league. Now, I acknowledge that there are different tier of player in the WNBA. Obviously, a Collier, a Stewart, an Ogwumike, a Wilson, a Ionescu, like they are the upper crust. A Reese, a Clark, they don't need the league. But I think there is a boldness in this generation of women, whether you're in that upper crust in terms of salary or maybe you really do want that league salary so that you can stay in the States. There is a conviction that this is not just about this present generation, it's laying precedent moving forward. So, having said all that, I think that these women are more organized than maybe we've ever seen them be. I think that owners are going to have to really sit and understand that if they're not in the right group in terms of valuing their organizations and the resources that they're providing for their athletes, then maybe they don't need to be a part of this moving forward. I think it could get interesting. I really think it could get interesting. I hope it doesn't get too interesting, but I really think it could get interesting. And you're smart to have kept an eye out on that because we're coming off of a monster year. I think this summer is going to be as energetic. The announcement of the expansion teams, like there's a lot happening for it to come to a screeching halt if the two sides of the table can't reach an agreement.
Yeah. Hope it doesn't get too interesting because you and I have a job to do,
Same.
and
Same.
we kind of need there to be a ball bouncing in
Uh-huh.
2026 to the
Yeah.
WNBA. What this is a very light last question for you that
Okay.
I saved for this one. Again, at the start, I said you were a hooper.
Mm-hmm.
You are a hooper. I can tell you still hoop. Do you actually get to play with the people at ESPN or like your other colleagues?
I have not had a run with anybody at ESPN. I live in the city, so when Nike has events at the headquarters, they have open runs and we get to test some product. I will go and I'll hoop with other women that hoops, or sometimes we have co-ed runs, and I get to see some industry people that are based in New York City. But I've not got on the court with anybody at. Let me think. Let me make sure that's a true statement. Yeah, I haven't been on the court with anybody at ESPN. But when I get a chance, I 100% still hoop. Now, at 35, it's like, hold on, let me stretch, let me warm up. The last time I was there, they were actually laughing at me because they was like, you look like the rough stretcher. I said, because I need to wake up in one piece tomorrow, so we got to take this time to stretch. Um, But I still love the game so much. If I could add anything to my routine, Colin, it would probably be hooping once or twice a week if I could add that consistently. But I have no shot at that with my schedule.
Yeah, you have to stay home now to take care of the poop from the dog.
Oh God, my child.
But okay, hopefully we'll get to see you shoot around with some of the bigger names that we know
Yeah.
down the line, and you could show them that you shot like what 90% from the line, from the
Ah,
free throw line in
once upon a
college.
time, Colin, we didn't miss free throws. That wasn't a thing.
Yeah. But thank you so much for joining me and talking about your story and talking about your thoughts on the NBA and WNBA. It's such a pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully we'll talk more about the growing game down
Yeah.
the line.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining FOS all the time, and we appreciate you, Monica.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin.